At 63, Evelyn Parker never imagined that the person she had loved and raised would one day try to take everything from her. A widow for 3 years, Evelyn had spent decades building a home filled with memories, warmth, and love. Yet now, on the day of her daughter Claire's 32nd birthday, the air was cold and distant. The house was immaculate, set for a celebration, but Evelyn moved like a ghost among guests who barely noticed her presence. Claire arrived in an elegant dress, flanked by her husband Mark and their 2 children, barely acknowledging the woman who had given her life. Evelyn smiled carefully, the sting of loneliness masked behind practiced grace. Claire's tone was polite but firm. She praised the party but quickly shifted to a topic that shattered the fragile peace. "Mom, we've been talking. It's time to consider assisted living," Claire said, eyes scanning Evelyn as if measuring her like an object. "This house is too much for you alone. It's expensive to maintain and honestly you need supervision." Evelyn's heart tightened. The very place she had poured her soul into was being reduced to a liability in her daughter's eyes. Mark quietly made his way to the liquor cabinet, unconcerned by the emotional weight of the moment. Meanwhile, Evelyn's grandchildren barely looked up from their phones. The words Claire spoke felt like a verdict handed down without trial. "We've put a deposit down at a nice facility. You'll have help, meals, and company." She handed Evelyn a list of what she could take with her clothes, a few personal items, but no furniture, no memories. Evelyn's mind raced. 40 years of marriage, 32 years of motherhood, now distilled into a few boxes and a timeline to vacate her own home. When asked for her answer, Claire said it wasn't a question, the papers were signed, and Evelyn had until the end of the month. Left standing in her gleaming kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the day, Evelyn felt a cold resolve settle inside her. Something had broken, yes, but something else was awakening, the promise of a new beginning. Tomorrow, she decided, she would start keeping promises to herself. Evelyn's mind drifted back to the years before the coldness took hold. She remembered the early mornings and late nights spent caring for her husband, David, as his health slowly declined, the countless sacrifices she made, putting her own dreams aside to ensure their family stayed whole and strong. She thought of the birthdays and graduations, the small celebrations filled with laughter and love. Claire as a child, eager to help in the kitchen, her eyes shining with admiration for the woman who had always been her anchor. Those moments were etched deep into Evelyn's heart, a tapestry woven from years of devotion and care. But time had shifted the balance. After David's passing, the warmth in the house cooled, replaced by an invisible barrier of distance and expectation. Claire, once the little girl who clung to her mother's side, had transformed into a woman focused on her own life, her own ambitions. Mark, ever pragmatic, saw Evelyn's presence as an obstacle rather than a blessing. Evelyn sighed, recalling how she had welcomed Lucas into their family 15 years ago, a young man aging out of foster care, lost and without a home. Unlike Claire, Lucas never demanded more than love and acceptance. He became the son Evelyn had always hoped for, visiting often, helping with chores, and bringing joy back into her life. Her heart ached, knowing that the very person who cherished her now was the one Claire wanted to cut out of the picture. The pain wasn't just about property or money. It was about being seen as disposable, a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. She realized that love and family had become transactional, weighed down by expectations and obligations rather than genuine connection. Evelyn's sacrifices had been taken for granted, and her identity reduced to a caretaker no longer needed. But within that pain was a flicker of clarity, a quiet voice reminding her that she deserved more than this. More than loneliness, more than being pushed aside. Evelyn understood that reclaiming her life meant facing difficult truths and making choices that would surprise everyone. The past was a chapter closed, but it had shaped the woman she was today, strong, resilient, and ready to fight for her dignity. As memories washed over her, Evelyn's resolve deepened. She was no longer just a mother or widow, she was a woman reclaiming her story. With a steady breath, she looked toward the future. It was time to break free from the roles imposed on her and start living for herself. The journey ahead would not be easy, but Evelyn knew it was one she had to take. Because after all those years of giving, she was finally ready to receive, starting with the gift of her own freedom. The moment came quietly but with the weight of a storm. Evelyn and Claire found themselves alone in the kitchen, the remnants of the party pushed aside like forgotten memories. Claire's voice was calm but firm, her eyes sharp and unreadable. "Mom, we need to talk," she began, setting her wine glass on the counter with a decisive clink. Evelyn felt her chest tighten but kept her composure. She knew this conversation was inevitable. Claire laid out the plan: the assisted living facility, the sale of the house, the division of assets. Each word was a blow, delivered without malice, but with a cold certainty that left no room for discussion. "This house is too big for you alone," Claire said, as if reciting facts. "It's expensive, and you're not as young as you used to be. We want what's best for you." Evelyn caught herself from trembling. "I'm 63, she said quietly but firmly. "I'm not infirm. I can take care of myself." Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mom, last month you called me 3 times about the same prescription. And Mrs. Henderson said she saw you wandering in the garden at midnight in your nightgown." Evelyn's voice softened. "I was checking on the roses after the storm. That's all." "That's exactly the point," Claire replied. "Normal people don't garden at midnight." Evelyn felt the sting of those words like icy rain. She wasn't being seen as a person, but as a problem, a risk to be managed. Her years of independence and care dismissed in a single sentence. Claire continued, unaware or uncaring of the damage she was causing. "We've already put a deposit down on Sunset Manor. It's a lovely place with activities, meals, and medical staff." Evelyn stood there, surrounded by the kitchen that held so many memories. "And my furniture? My things?" she asked softly. "No furniture. You can only bring personal items, clothes, photos. That sort of thing," Claire said, scrolling through her phone as if the details were trivial. The final blow came when Claire said, "You have until the end of the month to pack." Evelyn's heart pounded, but a cold, hard clarity began to take hold. 40 years of marriage, 32 years of motherhood, reduced to a timetable and a list of possessions. But beneath the shock was a fierce spark: the realization that she would no longer be pushed aside. When Evelyn asked when she needed to give her answer, Claire's response was chilling. "It's not really a question. The papers are signed." The kitchen, once a place of warmth, now felt like a courtroom. Evelyn's gaze met Claire's, the daughter she had kissed goodnight for 18 years, the woman she had watched walk down the aisle, the mother she had been. "I want you to look at me," Evelyn said quietly. Claire paused, irritation flickering across her face. "The only thing you can still give me," Evelyn said slowly, "is work. Isn't that what you told me?" For a moment, something flickered in Claire's eyes: uncertainty. Perhaps guilt. But then Mark's voice called from the living room, impatient. Don't be dramatic, Mom. This is what's best for everyone," Claire said, heading toward the door. Evelyn watched her go, the front door closing with a finality that echoed in her chest. But in the silence that followed, something had shifted. Something had broken, yes, but something else had awakened: a promise to herself that tomorrow she would begin to live for herself. This was the turning point. The moment Evelyn chose to stop being invisible and start fighting for the life she deserved. The morning after Claire's birthday, Evelyn woke before dawn with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. The house around her seemed different, not empty, but full of possibility. She brewed coffee in her favorite mug, the one David had given her on their 15th anniversary, the faded gold letters spelling out "World's Best Mom." Sitting at the kitchen table with a legal pad, Evelyn began taking inventory of her life. The house was worth $380,000. She had it appraised 6 months earlier. Her savings held $47,000, accumulated from David's life insurance and careful budgeting. She had no debt, no mortgage, only utilities and maintenance bills. On paper, Evelyn was more financially secure than many her age. More importantly, she was free. Her first call was to a local real estate agent, Janet Morrison, who arrived that afternoon with a bright enthusiasm. "This is a beautiful property," Janet said. "The market is strong. We could have you under contract within 2 weeks, maybe sooner." Evelyn surprised Janet when she said firmly, "I need it sold in 10 days. Janet raised an eyebrow. "That's aggressive. May I ask why the rush?" Evelyn thought of Claire's words, so matter-of-fact and dismissive, as if her life were a logistics problem. "I'm making some changes." Her next call was to her bank, where she spoke with a loan officer about transferring the deed to Lucas, her adopted son. Lucas had been part of her family for 15 years, a steady presence, the son she had chosen. He never demanded anything, never treated her love as entitlement. "This is a substantial gift," the officer warned. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Evelyn said with quiet certainty. Then she called a travel agency and booked a flight to California. She signed up for a 6-week cooking course, something she had always dreamed of but never made time for. Finally, she called Margaret, her longtime attorney. "I want to remove Claire as executor of my estate," she told Margaret. "Lucas will handle everything." Margaret was silent for a moment. "That's a significant change. Are you sure you want to do this without discussing it with Claire first?" "Yes," Evelyn said firmly. "I'm sure." As the day ended, Evelyn felt the weight of what she was doing and the freedom it promised. For the first time in decades, she was choosing for herself. Not out of anger, but out of love for the woman she still was, beneath all the roles and expectations. Tomorrow, she would begin her new life. Evelyn's flight landed in California on a crisp September morning. The rolling hills and sun-dappled vineyards felt like a different world from the cold, sterile conversations back home. She checked into a small bed and breakfast near Napa Valley, run by a warm-hearted woman named Sylvia, who immediately became her unofficial guardian angel. The 6-week culinary course was challenging but invigorating. Evelyn relearned how to trust herself not just in the kitchen, but in life. Each chopping lesson, each simmering sauce was a step toward reclaiming her independence. She discovered an unexpected joy in the tactile, the smells, and the textures that had been missing for years. Outside the classroom, Evelyn found friendship among classmates of all ages and backgrounds. They didn't know her as Mom or Widow Parker. She was simply Evelyn, a woman exploring a new chapter, daring to find happiness on her own terms. The calls and texts from Claire came in waves, filled with anger, confusion, and pleas. Evelyn didn't answer most of them. Instead, she leaned on Lucas's steady support. He reminded her she wasn't alone, that family wasn't just about blood but about love and respect. Her days filled with laughter, mistakes, and discoveries. She tasted wines she never thought she'd appreciate, learned to describe flavors in ways that surprised even herself. The experience wasn't just about cooking, it was about awakening her senses and her spirit. At night, she walked the quiet streets, reflecting on the life she left behind. The house, the kitchen, the daughter who tried to control her, but also the promise she had made to herself to live fully, bravely, without apology. Evelyn's transformation wasn't easy. Some days were lonely. Some nights, doubts crept in. But each morning she reminded herself why she had come to reclaim a life that was truly hers. The new Evelyn was no longer the woman who silently accepted being sidelined. She was a woman who tasted freedom and wouldn't let it go. And though the fight with Claire was far from over, Evelyn knew she had found something no one could take away, her own voice. This was more than a course or a vacation. It was the rebirth of a woman who had spent too long living for others and was finally learning to live for herself. Back home, the war had already begun. Claire, unable to accept Evelyn's independence, filed for conservatorship, claiming her mother was mentally unfit to manage her affairs. The court hearing was scheduled within days, a battleground where family love clashed with legal power. Evelyn returned, ready to face the fight head-on. In the courtroom, she sat beside her trusted attorney, Margaret, wearing the navy dress from Claire's birthday, the dress that had marked the beginning of this ordeal. Across the aisle, Claire sat rigid, flanked by her icy attorney, Patricia. The judge, younger than Evelyn expected but with kind eyes, called the room to order. Claire's lawyer outlined the accusations: erratic behavior, impulsive decisions, the sudden gift of the house to Lucas, and fleeing the country without informing family. Neighbors testified about strange nighttime gardening and repeated calls about the same issues. Margaret stood and countered calmly. Evelyn was a competent adult who made a legal and thoughtful decision about her property. Disagreement from her daughter didn't invalidate those choices. When the judge asked Evelyn to explain her decision, she spoke with quiet strength. Lucas was family not biologically, but in every meaningful way. He had never expected anything, had been a constant source of love and support. In contrast, Evelyn said, Claire had treated her home as a resource, not a refuge. Claire tried to interrupt, but Evelyn held her ground. The courtroom was silent except for the weight of her words. Claire admitted she was worried about her mother's health, about losing control, about inheritance. But Evelyn asked, better for whom? After deliberation, the judge ruled in Evelyn's favor. She was mentally competent and entitled to make her own decisions. The petition for conservatorship was denied. Relief washed over Evelyn, but the judge's words lingered. The family had communication issues that needed healing. Evelyn was free, but the road ahead would require more than legal victories. Outside the courtroom, Claire approached with tears streaming. She apologized, admitting her fears had clouded her judgment. Evelyn, cautious but hopeful, responded with a simple challenge: prove you want a relationship with me, not with what I can give you. It was a fragile truce but a beginning. Evelyn left that day not only with her autonomy intact but with a renewed sense of self-worth. She was a woman who had faced betrayal, fought back, and reclaimed her life on her terms. Weeks after the courtroom battle, something unexpected happened. Claire reached out not with demands, but with an apology. She came to visit Evelyn at the small apartment she had rented near the vineyard, a place alive with the promise of new beginnings. The two women sat quietly, the tension between them softened by time and shared memories. Claire spoke honestly about her fears losing her mother and the life she thought she knew. Evelyn listened, seeing beyond the anger to the daughter she had raised. "I want to know the real you," Claire said softly. "Not just my mother but the woman you've become." Evelyn smiled, realizing the journey they had both taken. The woman who had been invisible, reduced to a problem to be solved, was now visible, strong, confident, and full of life. She showed Claire the small photo of her and David at Claire's college graduation, a symbol of the past they both carried. They talked about wine, life, and the future, beginning to rebuild a relationship based on respect and understanding. Evelyn accepted a position as assistant sommelier at a local restaurant, diving into her passion with enthusiasm. Her days were filled with work she loved and friendships that nourished her spirit. The roses she once tended bloomed again, vibrant and resilient, much like Evelyn herself. Before Claire left, she hugged her mother tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Evelyn knew healing was a process, not an event. But as she watched Claire walk away, she felt hopeful for herself, for her daughter, and for the life she was finally free to live. No matter how hard the past was, Evelyn thought, it's never too late to take back your life and start fresh. And with that, she stepped fully into the next chapter of her story.